I'm going to open it up to our lovely stand-in chaplain, Father Matt Nigmar, to give us a brief reflection on this season of Advent. Give it up for Father Matt.
I have my watch pulled out so as to not go over time, I promise. So, we talked a little bit in the homily about, what Advent is all about, the life out of death. The reason we have Advent, guys, and just kind of basic information, is because Christmas is on December 25th. Now, some of you might have heard other priests talk about this, so this is a very simplified version. Why is Christmas on the 25th? Anybody ever thought about that? It's kind of like, well, that's because what we always do. That's what the priest tells us, right? It's the right answer. No, I'm kidding with that. Wrong answer. So, the History Channel's answer is because Christianity showed up and decided to Christianize some pagan holidays, because it's really just all about the winter solstice. But that's actually not quite true. While there is evidence for that, there's actually something deeper going on. So, we have to start with the Gospel of John. Christ in John chapter 1 is, guess what? The light of the world. Okay? Now, can anybody tell me what the darkest day of the year is? December 21st. Okay? Now, every so many years we have a leap year. How many years is that? 4 years. What's 21 plus 4? 25. 21 plus 4 is 25. Why is that important? Because the Gregorian calendar, so the calendar that we actually use is off just enough so that when they placed Christmas on the 25th, the idea is that that was the darkest day of the year. What the church is saying by placing Christmas there is that Christ, the light of the world, comes to us in the fullness of time, which is the darkest time possible. So guys, when we talk about Advent, the reason we prepare ourselves, the reason we have these weeks of Advent, which is kind of a mini Lent, so to speak, is so that we can actually prepare ourselves to receive the light of the world. If you go to that song, O Come, Emmanuel, these days starting with December 17th and moving through the 24th, these are when we, as the church, we pray the O antiphons during evening prayer. And the O antiphons are in actually every verse of that song. They're antiphons prayed before we say the Magnificat, my soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. And as we pray these, what's really cool is Christ's response is actually hidden in those verses. Now I'm going to nerd out for just about 30 seconds here. Okay, so bear with me. If we go to O Come, Emmanuel in Latin, it actually starts with a wisdom. It doesn't start with O Come, Emmanuel. It starts with wisdom, which in Latin is sapientia. Then it says Adonai, starts with an A. Then Rex Gentium. Okay, then it says Clavix David, key of the nation, or key of David, excuse me. So we have cross, C-R-S. Then Oriens starts with an O. Radix Jesse starts with an R, and then Emmanuel starts with an E. So we're given in those verses a Latin acrostic, really, or two Latin words. It's ero cras, which means I will come. So as we're praying, O come, Emmanuel, guys, Christ's response is hidden in that song. But it's also a guaranteed response, is that, guess what? I will come. So guys, when we talk about the coming of Christ, we're talking about preparing for God who is guaranteed to come. His response is in the song. And we know he's coming. But the reason we prepare our hearts is so that we can become better acquainted with what I mentioned in the homily, those areas of darkness, those areas of sin, and give those to the child Jesus. He entered our poverty. Augustine reflects on the poorness of the Word of God, or the Word that created the universe, that spoke life to the world, is now silent as a small child, just to listen to us. So the point of Advent, guys, as I conclude, is that we prepare our hearts to receive the light of the world. But in so doing, we then offer to the child Jesus, not the areas where we're perfect, we offer to him our sin. We offer to him those secret crevices of our heart, so that he can enter there and bring light to even our darkness.
All right, without further ado, I would like to introduce Chick Maxwell to speak. And I have to say, since we started YCP a couple of years ago, January of 2016, Chip's name has been brought up multiple times as somebody that would be a speaker. And we thought, gosh, we got to fit him in at some point. And we thought, what a better way to close out 2017 than for him to drop some knowledge on us about not only his experience in public policy, and I recently learned in a phone conversation with him, he knows a lot about stem cell research. And so his vast array of knowledge on different subjects, but again, how you live your faith out in different areas of life, we thought would be really cool. And he is on the radio, and I promised him that I wouldn't make the joke about he has the perfect face for radio, but please welcome the man that has the perfect face for radio. Give it up for Chip Maxwell.
Both?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ryan. Actually, thank you, Joe Redding. I don't think Joe made it here tonight, but my appearance actually started with a conversation with Joe over the summer. He came to one of our radio station events. He passed the baton on to Ryan. It's a little daunting. First of all, yes, Father, I was paying attention. He made the point upstairs, guys with beards have an advantage. So, strike one. And then Ryan couldn't resist the face made. But you see now there is a reason why I do radio instead of television. I didn't really think it had to be mentioned into the microphone, Ryan, but there it is. And then I made the mistake of looking at your previous speakers and your website. You have had some impressive people with actual talent come and speak to you. So I'm going to have to practice what I'm preaching tonight. Be not afraid. And I'll press on. It's also very dangerous. I didn't know until I got here. There are several people here who know me, know my family. My producer, Ian Swanson, is here. And so I know what's going on here, you Hillsdale guys, Ryan Besmer and Ian Swanson. Ian's got darts in his pocket. And if I start running long, my producer is going to do what he has to do in the studio, occasionally rein me in. So despite all that, I will press on. I would like to say a quick prayer. This is something, this is, after all, the young Catholic professionals. Every morning before we go on the air, and anytime I'm going to speak publicly, this is something that my mom told me that my grandfather, her father, did. I never knew him. He died when she was in high school, but he was a pretty well-known public speaker. And my mom inherited that gene from him, Mary Maxwell. She had the 13 million hits on YouTube. And so I decided, well, seems to be working for them. I say a prayer, some of you may know it. It's called the Memorare. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly to thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O blessed Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petition, but in your mercy hear and answer me. Amen. I add a little chaser. We do have some scriptural evidence that God and Jesus, they just aren't able to say no to her. And so my chaser is, Blessed Mother, please ask God the Father and God the Son to send God the Holy Spirit to help me get this right. Let me yield fruit in due season, and let the season be now. Please give me right judgment. And I pray for right judgment for Ian and for everybody on our team. And I just, every conversation I'm involved in ultimately want it to serve God, right? Serve the kingdom. So may our gathering tonight also be infused with the Holy Spirit and serve God. All right. Be not afraid. Don't be afraid to live your life as a Catholic professional. Be not afraid, you may know this, was one of the main messages of the papacy of Pope St. John Paul II. And Ian noted on the radio just this morning, I was talking about this event tonight, and Ian, what is it, the 375, I think you said, places in Scripture where Jesus says, don't be afraid, be not afraid, some variation on that theme. And it still animates my faith today. When I was at your time in life, John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła, became Pope when I was a junior in high school. So when I was at your time in life, my 20s, my 30s, the 1980s, the 1990s, that was the Pope, John Paul the Great, as some of us now call him. And what a blessing, what a grace it was to be a young person during his papacy. I don't know that there's ever been, or maybe ever will be, a pope quite like Karol Wojtyła in his passion for youth. He's the one, you probably know this, who started World Youth Day in the Catholic Church. He is somebody who made me feel like he was talking to me. He said, look, the church isn't just for the elderly. The church is, we need you. We need you, young people. You need us too. You need the church, but Mother Church also needs you. And he did something that is a great frustration of mine as a conservative. And I'm not trying not to get too political tonight, but Ian's heard me say this before. One of my great frustrations as a conservative is we're terrible at connecting with younger people, with the younger generation. And I believe the truth is we conservatives are the ones who are really trying to save the future for you, not just in terms of fiscal policy. You're being buried alive under an avalanche of deficits and debt. I don't know if you realize that. People my age are overspending like crazy. We're leaving the tab for you. And it isn't just financial issues. I think socially, morally, we're also leading you astray to a certain degree. And so I worry about these things, but we're not. John Paul II was magnificent at connecting with youth. Youth loved him. And he certainly, maybe you can tell, that sense of connection, it still animates my faith today. And so I hope to some degree I'm able to connect with you tonight. You may agree, you may disagree with some of the things I have to say, and I want to visit with you. We'll have a little Q&A, and I'll stick around and visit afterwards until the last person has left. But it's so important. If you've seen a movie, there's a great movie about the life of John Paul II. Cary Elwes plays the young Karol Wojtyła. And then when he becomes Pope, John Vogt takes over and plays the character for the rest of the movie. But there's a great scene early on. Karol Wojtyła had a passion for youth long before he became Pope. When he was a priest, when he was a bishop in Poland. There's a scene in the movie where he and a bunch of young people, your age, they're carrying kayaks and heading off to go kayaking on the river. And they start talking about sex. And one of them says, Father Karol, do your superiors know that you speak to us with such candor about sex? And he doesn't bat an eyelash. He says, oh, it is from God. You know, it's good. A man and a woman totally giving themselves to each other. It's a sacred thing. In the context of marriage, of course. I mean, he always held the line on doctrine. But he had a way of explaining things in a joyful way. In other words, we're not here to rain on your parade as a church. We're not here to ruin the party. We're here to help you enjoy life to the fullest. If you will do this way, it's going to be even better. Actually, there are numerous social science studies out there that say people of faith have better sex lives than the general population. And I suggest to you it's because you are really doing it the way intended. God wants us to be happy and joyful. John Paul was a master at that, at conveying that. And what I want to go after tonight are, I will call them 3 myths, 3 things that I think make it tough to be a Catholic professional today, because it can be tough out there. One is that Christianity equals weakness. A professional, you got to be bold, strong in your convictions. Christianity, that's going to drag you down. One of the foremost modern voices, Friedrich Nietzsche, 19th century German political philosopher. He was one of the boldest, just declaring, God is dead. We've grown up as human beings. We don't need God anymore. Will to power. That was his phrase. Religion is for the weak. It's a way for the weak to try to manipulate the strong and keep us from fulfilling our destiny. The Nazis drew a lot from Friedrich Nietzsche, okay? And you hear some echoes of modern thought there in Nietzsche. Actually, when I was in college, I wrote for a conservative student newspaper, and we had a little fun in the letters to the editor section. You know, one time we'd have some spoof stuff in there, and we had one early on. One of the letters was, dear sir, dear editor, God is dead. Signed, Friedrich Nietzsche. And there are some other letters, and then at the end of it, dear editor, Nietzsche is dead. Signed, God. I couldn't resist. But that argument is out there, and the popular culture. There's a lot of pressure right now in that regard. It's for losers. Christianity, practicing your faith, that's for losers, not for professionals. I think the best person to make the counter-argument, one of my favorites anyway, is C.S. Lewis. If you're familiar with C.S. Lewis, I see a few heads nodding. If you're not, dig out some C.S. Lewis. He's great. Are you kidding? Christianity is not for the wimps. Christianity is a fighting religion. He said it takes guts, it takes backbone. Sometimes it takes physical strength. It most surely takes spiritual strength of character. It's not for the faint of heart. So don't let anyone ever try to tell you, well, that's for weaklings. That's not for people who aspire to be professional. Absolutely not. Now, there is pushback out there in the world against those who dare to act as people of faith in professional life. But that also presents an opportunity. Ryan, you mentioned stem cell research. About a decade ago, the stem cell research battle was really hot in Nebraska. And the basic argument is stem cells are cells at the stem stage. They haven't yet branched out and become nerve, muscle, bone, organ, and so forth. They're the building block cells of life. Embryos are full of stem cells. We all started off that way, and our stem cells programmed different parts of the body to develop. Well, there was a push in science, well, let's get those stem cells from the embryos and see what we can do with them. Well, the problem is you destroy the embryo when you do that. Well, that raises a problem, because that's a human life. It's at a very early stage, but it's a human life, all right? The good news is there are other sources of stem cells. Your body has stem cells in it right now. When you scrape your elbow, it's stem cells that are used to replace it. And for more serious treatments, leukemia and so forth, that's taking stem cells out of your bone marrow to treat leukemia. There are other sources, and so it isn't necessary. But my point here is you need strength to be a person of faith in the professional world. And one of the graces of the stem cell battles, we lost a few, but we won some big victories. We got use of embryos for research banned in Nebraska. We got cloning banned in Nebraska. And it was because we didn't have time for the luxury of doctrinal or denominational rivalries and arguments and so forth. Are you kidding? I mean, one mode of operation for the devil is divide and conquer. And he's already had too much success at that in the world of faith. So everybody of all kinds of denominations linked arms and stood up for life. And it was, but I think of that when I think of, what do you mean Christians are weak? It takes strength. Now, we've got to be willing to rise above our differences to be at our strongest. But it can be done, and look for those opportunities out there. Don't be bullied. Christianity equals ignorance. That's another myth out there. That's another thing. Well, you can't be a professional person. You can't be a sophisticated person and still believe in God and religion and all those fairy tales. That's an impediment to true knowledge and enlightenment. And this is the modern pressure for relativism. I'll tell you, what worries me more when I look at people your age and my children, I have 7 children, ages 28 to 14. So these are not hypothetical, theoretical propositions for me. We have some of these conversations at our dinner table. And they're not always smooth conversations, okay? Because there's tremendous cultural pressure out there, going back to Nietzsche and others. I'm not so much worried about atheism as I am apathy. I think for a lot of young people, maybe God exists, maybe he doesn't. I don't care. He's irrelevant. Even if he's up there. My understanding is part of his deal is he's not going to micromanage us. He's not going to treat us like robots. So I'm God. I don't need that God. I'm God. I can decide what's right or what's wrong, what's true, what's false, what's good, what's evil. I don't need God. I don't need 4,000 years of Judeo-Christian teachings to guide me. I'm my own guiding star. I'm God. That's something that really worries me. And if you surrender to some kind of religion, some kind of religious authority, well, you're surrendering knowledge. You're being ignorant. You're holding yourself back. In the stem cell battle, there was this false dichotomy presented that, well, it's either science or religion, but they're mutually exclusive. You can't be a scientific professional and also be a person of faith. They're mutually exclusive. Well, that is absolutely not true. First of all, if you want to check the historical record, when Europe was descending into the Dark Ages, the church was the main entity that preserved the body of knowledge and the cultural heritage that is the foundation of Western civilization. So the church is not hostile. The university system we know today, much of it has its roots in the church. Harvard and the Ivy League schools, they all started off as seminaries, all right? So don't let anybody sell you this argument that religion is anti-knowledge. Or in the stem cell research debate, well, if you question any of this, if you're not willing to destroy embryos for research, then you're anti-research, you're anti-science, you're a troglodyte, you're a Luddite. Absolutely false, absolutely wrong. But it's out there. It's out there. You need to be aware of it, and don't let yourself. I'm probably going to use the word bully a lot tonight. Don't let yourself be bullied or cowed into submission because somebody sets up that false dichotomy for you. The group that I work for, Nebraska Coalition for Ethical Research, in the stem cell research debate, it was founded by scientists, by doctors who said, no, this isn't true. This isn't true. Science and religion can fit hand in glove, and so you more evidence. You could be a professional and be a person of faith. The flip side of that, oh, by the way, I got to give Greg Schleppenbach a plug. He was with the Nebraska Catholic Conference. He's with the Washington office now, the Conference of Catholic Bishops. He was the one that put me on to the UNMC textbook, embryology textbook, when I was a state senator in the midst of these battles. And the embryology textbook at the university, our state medical school, was almost lyrical in its description of how from the very first cell, science calls it a zygote, from that very first cell, you're a human being. Your whole genetic blueprint is there. You are 100% human. It's all there, right from the start, from fertilization. It's just stages of development after that. Now, some people don't reach some stages of development. It doesn't make them less human. You're 100% human right from the start. See, you need to educate yourselves on these things and just go out there and be fearless. I was able to be fearless, not because I'm an expert in science, but the experts coached me and taught me, and then I could take it out to the political arena as an office holder and later as an advocate. And you cannot back down from these battles, and you must stand for the principle that no, not only is knowledge possible while also being a religious person, but as a matter of fact, wisdom, very smart people can make very wrong decisions. Brain smarts alone isn't enough. In fact, if you don't have 4,000 years of Judeo-Christian teachings in your life and as part of your decision-making process, you increase the odds exponentially that you're going to screw up in some way as an individual and as a society. We've got to be bullish about making these kind of arguments out there. On this topic, let me just leave you with this. Pope Paul VI, Humanae Vitae, 1968. We were talking about this on the radio recently. This is when he didn't give the green light to contraception. And even within the Catholic Church, actually the majority, the commission that researched the issue, the majority report was, give it a thumbs up. He didn't. And oh my gosh, this guy and his church, they're old, they're behind the times, they're out of touch. He warned about 4 things. He said there are going to be 4 negative consequences if we do this. The general acceptance of contraception. This is hard for modern ears to hear. He said it's going to lower moral standards in general throughout society. It's going to undermine marital fidelity and therefore the institution of marriage. It is going to lessen respect for women by men, and it's going to lead to governments using coercive technology to prevent birth. Now, we don't have forced abortions like China has, but excuse me, I believe there was a mandate that came down recently that said the Catholic Church has to fund contraceptive coverage in insurance plans for its employees. Okay? And how about the other ones? Anybody want to say Paul VI was old and out of touch and didn't know what he was talking about? His crystal ball was working better than anybody else's in 1968. Not only do men have less respect for women now, women have less respect for women. And again, this is not a theoretical, hypothetical proposition. I have daughters ages 19, 16, and 14. And we have some of the same arguments under our roof that maybe happen in your families. You are not going out dressed like that. Well, everybody else is. Everybody else is dressed that way. I don't want to. What are you going to do, Dad? Put me in a burqa? Well, okay. We have to be accommodating to other cultures. No, we're not to the burqa stage, but a little more fabric. We'll find a medium. But I'm trying to make light of it, but it's also a very serious problem when you have women thinking of themselves as commodities, as pieces of meat out there. We just had this thing in the news, didn't we, Ian? Another thing about boys collecting nude photos, and oh my gosh, he put it out there. He promised me he wouldn't. My wife is a high school teacher. We have kids in high school. We have kids in junior high. Boys right now are genuinely puzzled. They're called into the, what are you doing walking around asking girls for nude photos, for your phone? And they're genuinely puzzled. Well, what do you mean? What are you so upset about? Well, everybody's doing it. This is social media. This is what we do now. They're genuinely puzzled about why is anyone upset about this. I get worked up about this because there's a lot of rhetoric out there about a war on women. It's a war on women. And a lot of times the rhetoric is directed at conservatives. And I promised you I'm not going to go political on you tonight. But I just want to note, we've had an explosion of revelations, right, about sexual misconduct going back 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Gosh, going back right about to Humanae Vitae in 1968. And this is what happens when you turn sexuality into a recreational sport. Get whatever you can, wherever you can, however you can, instead of having it be something sacred, shared between a man and a woman, totally committed to each other. I submit that Paul VI crystal ball was working very well in 1968. All right, last point I want to make. Christianity equals tyranny. Religion equals tyranny. You can't be a professional. You can't be a sophisticated person and let religion... Here's the formulation I would hear as a state senator. Pro-life issue or something else. We can't impose religious views on others. Okay, now hold on. We as people of faith, we're not against liberty or free competition of ideas. We're not the people who say you have to agree with us or we're going to cut your head off. Or you have to agree with us or we're going to put you out of business, cake baker or whoever else. We're not the ones doing that. It's the other side. We're way beyond toleration. It's the other side who's issuing ultimatums, saying, you better agree with us or else. All right? The Christian approach is, hey, we shouldn't get any special advantage or disadvantage. In the public arena, see, as a state senator, we'd be, no, we can't enact this pro-life measure. You shouldn't be opposing stem cell research. You can go have your religious views in your home or in your church, but this is the public arena. There's no place for those here. Oh, really? If that's true, we've got some heavy lifting to do. Oh, like some major amendments to the Constitution, starting with the 13th, the abolition of slavery. A lot of the abolitionist leaders were motivated by their religious convictions. So were they improperly imposing their religious views on society? We've got some amendments. We've got overhauling to do in federal legislation. How about the 1960s? All the civil rights statutes. How about all the statutes against child labor and so forth? We've got a lot of laws we have to repeal. If religious motivation can't taint policy in this country, absolutely false, reject it. It's fine. You can rely on religion and religious views as a professional, or you can reject them. You're free to do either. Do not ever let anyone bully you into, that's if you're motivated by a religious conviction, you can't hold that position. Absolutely false. All right, last point, and then hopefully we'll have some time to visit a bit. Christianity is not weakness, it's not ignorance, it's not tyranny, but it is, one thing it is advocacy. Advocacy. If you're going to say, I'm Catholic, then that does carry some responsibility with it. And I'll even broaden it to say Christian, because we've got folks here of various denominations. A Catholic Mass ends with ite missa est, the Mass is ended. The English formulation sometimes is go in peace. There's some debate about that missa est, M-I-S-S-A. Benedict XVI said, in antiquity, ancient Rome, that Latin word meant just kind of a neutral statement of dismissal. We're done. Okay, you can go home. But Benedict XVI said, in Christian usage, it has come to mean more than just we're done here. It has come to mean more you are sent. Missa as in missio, mission. You are sent. You're not just showing up for an hour to a reassuring echo chamber and then, you go back into the world. I'm afraid for some of us, and I've wrestled with this at times. You go into church and you may genuinely believe what's being said and the readings and receiving communion and so forth. But it's kind of like you don a cloak and you go in there. But an hour later when you're leaving, we're getting to the doors here. Well, I'll just leave this here and I'll come in and put it on next week. Kind of like a vestment that the priest wears, but I can't wear this outside the doors in public. I'm a professional. What will people think? I can't talk about my faith out there. I can't mention these things out there. That's not the deal. Then turn in your Catholic card. Turn in your Christian card. That's not the deal. It's supposed to be a 24/7, every day a week proposition. All right? That doesn't mean you run around preaching sermons all the time. But people who know you for more than 5 or 10 minutes may ought to have a clue maybe that you are a person of faith. You've got to be, some people are selective in their faith. Well, you're a different person depending on the people and the situations you're in. And I'm not perfect on this. There have been times in my life. Now, I've reached a stage now. I'm 55. I'm a husband. I'm a father with 7 children, 2 dogs. I don't care. You're just going to have to deal with me as I am. I don't have to impress anybody anymore. I don't have to. No, you're going to have to deal with me, and this is who I am, and deal with. And I'll tell you what, in all seriousness, I've had people, including Republicans, including conservatives, Ian, maybe you've run into this too, who have said, you could have had such a great trajectory. I've served in public office. I've won some, I've lost some. And I've had people say to me, you could have had a much better run. You could have had a much more successful political career if you would have cut out that pro-life crap. You'd have backed off on the social issues, quit making so much noise about that stuff. You'd have had a much smoother trajectory. You could, if that's the price of admission, I'm not willing to pay that price. And I suggest that you shouldn't either. You want to be the same person everywhere and all times. I don't fall prey to that temptation. Very last point. I see Ryan circling back. He's got the hook. The screw tape letters. Back to C.S. Lewis. You ought to find a copy if you haven't read it. If you really want to treat yourself, listen to the audio version by John Cleese, one of the Monty Python guys. He was just in town recently. And Cleese is pretty critical of institutional religion, as far as I understand, but he does a brilliant job. Screwtape is a senior devil, and he's training his junior devil nephew, Wormwood, who's kind of a klutz. He's kind of a screw-up. And he's training him on how to tempt humans, how to win patience for our Father below, as he refers to Satan. And so he's given all these tricks of the trade. And one of them is, he said, these people, they're so fickle, they're so, and the smarter they think they are, the more susceptible they are to this temptation. Get them to be different people in different places, different personality with a different person. Maybe they act religious with religious people, but when they're out with other friends, they make fun of religion, and they make fun of, I go to that church, but oh gosh, it's terrible. It's, that kind of thing. And again, been times in my life, if I'm honest about it, I've succumbed to that temptation. Now, as I say, I've reached a stage now where I am who I am now. But it is a temptation, especially you're at a time in life where you're trying to figure out, who am I? Who am I going to be? What am I? I had a few conversations with people tonight. You are where I have been several times in my life, between jobs, figuring out what's next. I had to go through that whole process a year ago. I lost in the primary election. Well, who am I going to be now? And so I'm not saying it's easy, But don't fall prey to that temptation. Be your same true self everywhere and always. Be true to yourself. Be true to God. Be true to your Catholic faith. Be true to your Christian faith. Be not afraid to live as a Catholic Christian professional. I'm going to stop there. Ryan, do we have any time left? We have plenty of time for questions. Hey, we can treat this like a talk radio show. Fire away. I really would love to know what you're thinking. I have children your age. We conservatives, we need to connect better with the youth. Fire away, even if you disagree. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Floor is open. I've numbed you. Yes?
Question. So I do this cycle thing where I call our state senator like 3 to 5 times a week on different things that they're passing or like thinking. How do you call state? Like, how would you say calling state senator is there in line? And what are your thoughts on that? And where should you get your information to go to?
So you're saying you regularly contact your state senator. That is a good thing. And what else are you asking?
How would you go about like looking up the progress of like where the bill is coming from?
Oh, well, Nebraska has a pretty good website. I don't know, nebraska.gov or something, Ian? NebraskaLegislature.gov. Thank you. Thank goodness my wingman's here. I mean, this is how our show goes. I rely on him every minute of the show. NebraskaLegislature.gov has a pretty good system of tracking what's going on, either by the state senator who introduced it or by the bill itself. But to your other question, I don't want that to get lost in the shuffle. Call them. Call your state senators. In my day, it was the early 2000s. People were still mailing, sending postcards and letters. It's more electronic and digital now. Call them, send them emails, send them. Lobbyists are constantly contacting state senators. People inside the system are, and that's fine. There's no substitute, though, for the constituent, for the voter. I guarantee you, the senator may agree or disagree, but the senator's not going to ignore it, especially if it's the senator who represents you, from your district. I would answer mail-in contacts from anybody in the state of Nebraska, because I figured they all had a claim on me, because the laws that I'm going to vote on are going to affect everybody, taxes and pro-life issues and whatever. But don't ever get discouraged. Oh, I don't know, does it do any good to contact them? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Be respectful. If you're a jerk about it, then you're actually going to hurt your cause. But if you are respectful and making a cogent point, and don't be afraid to contact them more than once if necessary. Sometimes it takes some sustained effort to break through. But that's good. I'm encouraged to hear you say that you do that. That's good. Other questions? Yes?
Can you share a little bit more about your biography and how you got started in your professional life, how you found yourself running into office?
Wow. Well, just because my resume, for a guy who's conservative, I'm unconventional, sort of a conservative do-gooder. Most of the jobs in okay, let's back up. So I'm born and raised here. St. Cecilia's for grade school, Creighton Prep for high school, Boston College, Jesuit school. I think it's a Catholic school. Sometimes I wondered. I'm sorry. BC was affiliated with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. I did a stint in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. I taught school in Jamaica, in Kingston, Jamaica, for a year. I mentioned it because that was really a formative experience in my life. That was, wow. Just generic middle-class guy from Nebraska. You find out, people argue about the 1%. Wow. Living in a third world country, just the trip in from the airport through the city and stuff, holy smokes, there's a whole other world out there. So that was very eye-opening, great experience. Taught school there, and I almost became a Jesuit. There was an offer to stay in this program for a second year. For me, it was a bigger decision. It was, I like this, I enjoy it. People seem to appreciate the job I'm doing here, but it isn't like another year. Is this my life? And I was pretty close to maybe I'm supposed to be a Jesuit and do this kind of missionary work my whole life. It didn't quite ring true. I still felt called to come back, to the first world, to America. But those lessons, that was a formative experience for me. Anyway, I'll just kind of fast forward through. Eventually, I worked in a homeless shelter, did some other things. Went to law school, was in that field for a while, then was in journalism. Basically, I've done everything that ranks in the single digits in the public approval polls. Politician, lobbyist, journalist, and so yes, talk radio host, and so mothers hide their children from me when we pass on the street. Don't look upon the evil, So, but one of my favorite jobs along the way was for 4 years. I was the development director at Jesuit Middle School. It's now known as Jesuit Academy, 4th through 8th grade program in North Omaha. Just really working in the trenches in the inner city to try to give young boys a good shot at an educational foundation to get them launched in life. And then my wife, that turned out to be, who was it? Ryan, I think you were saying that part of the reason that this group exists is because, you want to get involved in your parish, and I was. In fact, I coached Matt Poren. Where are you, Matt? Coached him in basketball and served on the parish council and stuff. But I'd go to a parish council meeting and the spiritual life and worship committee, and I was early 30s, and I was usually the only person under the age of 60, maybe under the age of 50 in the room, And so it's great. I got to tell you, in case I forget to say this, you don't understand the joy it brings to my heart just to know that there are people like you who care enough to come out once a month, and more frequently it sounds like. But I walked in and saw how many people were at Mass, and I see how many of you are here now. It just gives a 55-year-old hope for the future. So God bless all of you for that. But this kind of thing wasn't around in my time. What happened was I met one of these committee meetings, Spiritual Life and Worship Committee, March 14th, 1998. But and this woman comes in and starts talking about these 2 children she adopted from Guatemala. Oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. It did not hurt that she was a babe, hopefully, you're meeting some people of interest here too. There's nothing wrong with that. As Carol Wojtyła said, it's from God. You just do it right. But anyway, who is this woman? And so I think I used the boys in the adoption a couple of times as an excuse to get together. But we never seemed to get around to the adoption story, so we'd have to get together and have lunch again. And anyway, that is now Pam, my wife. I refer to it as God's revenge on the lifelong bachelor. I was just bumbling along, and wife, kids, dog, house, boom, bam, shock therapy. But I said, and so some of you know Tomas, our oldest. And Chris knows him, I know. And in fact, they're classmates at Creighton, right? And we got married. My wife adopted the boys. I met them as a threesome. Then she adopted me, and we weren't having any of our own, and so we ended up adopting. We would get mailers from Guatemala, from the orphanage, where my wife had worked at an orphanage. That's where she ran across these 2 boys. She was a single woman at the time. It was a faith thing for her. She ended up adopting them and came back, and I ran across them. Be careful getting involved in your parish. There's no telling where that may lead. We weren't having any of our own. We ended up adopting 2 girls. We'd get these mailings, and I could see that look in our eye, from the orphanage. And so we had 4, 2 boys, 2 girls, and I kind of thought maybe we were done. Until the fall of 2015, I was at a funeral in Milwaukee. You poor people, you're getting more detail than you wanted. I was at a funeral in Milwaukee. A friend had died, and my wife calls. Now, she often gets calls from people about foster placements and adoption. She knows a lot about it. She's got a real heart for it. Well, she started talking. I pulled the car over to the curb, stopped, and said, okay, start over. Because I could feel the tectonic plates of the earth starting to shift beneath me. Like, sounds like our number may be up. Well, through mutual friends, she had found out about 3 children whose single mother had died of cancer. Well, actually, she was dying of cancer at the time. She only lasted 3 or 4 weeks after we heard about it. please, dying wish of the mother, please don't split up the kids. Please, if you can get them to a Catholic family, not because of any religious rivalry or something, but they were raised that way, it'd be one less change. And oh, by the way, if the family is at least familiar with Guatemala, all of our kids are, God, you are a rascal. Gee, I wonder how this is going to go. And so I think we're done now with 7 kids, but anyway, so that our family came about in an unusual way. It was not my wife and I courting. It was my wife actually taking care of a young boy, Otto, our second youngest son, who actually was dying of malnutrition at this orphanage in Guatemala, and she kind of took him under his wing, nursed him back to health. His brother Tomas kind of, who's this gringo? What's going on here? And that's how our family came to. Most of the important things I've done in my life, including stumbling into a daily radio show, are, you think you've got plans and ideas, and oh, okay, so I have landed. I served in the state legislature, served on the county board. I took a run at Congress in the spring of 2016. Don Bacon won the primary. I turned right around and endorsed him, and he's our congressman now. Actually, we're friends today. He's going to be on our radio show tomorrow morning. Breakfast with Bacon at 8 o'clock, if you want to join us. In figuring out after that election, I'm not kidding. I know what it's like to be between jobs. I know what it's like. And I'll tell you what, it's one thing if you're 25 or 30. It's another thing if you're married and have 7 kids and you're kind of not sure what's next. There's a little pressure there. So I understand. It's not always easy. But through the grace of God, well, Ian heard me say this on the radio at Thanksgiving time. There's a prayer out there. Obviously, I don't have it in front of me, but it goes something like, I asked for strength that I could conquer. I was given weakness so that I would know the need of God. I asked for this, I got that. I asked for this, I got that. And the prayer winds up by saying something like, I got nothing that I asked for and everything I hoped for. I am among all men most richly blessed. And so I do feel that way. I guess God is still God. You do know what's best and what's going on. So it's been kind of a strange journey that deposits me here before you tonight. I guess if there's a common thread, it is advocacy. It is trying to fight the good fight, whether it's as an office holder, whether it's as a lobbyist, whether it's on the radio, trying to promote good values. Advocacy maybe is the common thread. I did see some other hands. I don't know how we're doing on time. One more question, Ryan says. Yes?
You mentioned trying to connect with young people,
Yeah.
young Catholics. I taught both in Nebraska and on the East Coast, and I realize it's a big world out there. Some areas of the country, people don't necessarily agree with the current pope.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really tough to reconcile. It's almost like you got two, separate churches. Like some people don't necessarily agree with his views, maybe more liberal.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you experienced that on the radio or because Nebraska is, more conservative. So. Yes. I've actually had some listeners who've sent me some articles about the current pope, that they're not happy with him, on some of the political issues. I can only say, as a person of faith, it matters what the pope says, certainly, and I want the Holy Father to be a part of the public conversation. I know from Ian and others that they want the Pope to be on his game, that just like I want the Dalai Lama to be on his game, and I want the Archbishop of Canterbury to be on his game. I want all the religious leaders on their game. It's a long game if you're a person of faith. Because of my politics, I found it a little easier to warm up to Benedict XVI and John Paul II than the current Pope. Now, I like, as a sort of a populist, just Joe middle class, I like the way Francis is a commoner, and pushes away a lot of the trappings of the position and visits the prisons and things like that. I find that very refreshing. I get a little nervous sometimes when he wants to,
bash capitalism or some of the more political things. But I'm in it for the long game as a person of faith, and so I don't know if I'm answering your question or not. I'm speaking to the young Catholic professionals. I'm thinking, you don't trash the Pope at a Catholic event. And I don't, and that's not what's in my heart either. I don't. There are things about this Pope I really like. He's a little tougher to digest for people who are conservative politically. But we've got to, Ian and I talk about this on the radio. Here, I'll wrap up with this, Ryan. We do need to find some places where we can go and agree, whether we're Democrats, Republicans, whether we're conservative Catholics or more liberal Catholics, we've got to be able to find the common ground. Maybe I'll finish with the stem cell research, what I was talking about before. You had Catholics, you had Lutherans, you had evangelicals, you had people of all different stripes of Christianity who, if you scratched and dug down, they'd have some differences, even on different political issues, never mind religious issues. But you find what your common ground is, you find what your priority is. In this case, it was defending the sanctity of life, and you just go all in on that and celebrate what you agree on. I don't know how it is for other people, even in my marriage. My wife and I don't agree on everything. We have to find ways to peacefully coexist. I assure you, my children and I don't agree on everything. And relatives and friends and so forth, find the common ground and try to push through, I guess. But it can be tough. I tell you what, I'll say what I said before. I'm glad to stick around and visit with whoever wants to visit some more, but I think I better surrender the microphone. Ryan, thanks again. Thank you so much for inviting me. God bless all of you.